RJ the Sandman with RNK The Show, coming to you with another video. This is a special video to commemorate Black History Month. Per se, commemorate, really to expose some of the lies and the BS that we were told about Black history, supposed Black history. It's entitled Fuck Black History Month. Welcome back to part 3. Let's go ahead and get in that info. Ooh, y'all gonna hate me. Around 1100, the ventilator was invented in Egypt. In 1285, the largest hospital in the Middle Ages in the pre-modern era was built in Cairo, Egypt by Sultan Qua'al al-Mansur. Treatment was given free to all patients, no matter of their background or gender or ethnicity or income. Tetracycline was used by Nubians based on bone remains between 350 AD and 550 AD. The antibiotic was in wide commercial use only in the mid-20th century. The theory is earthed in jars containing grain used by making beer containing bacterium Streptomyces, which produced tetracycline. Although Nubians were not aware of tetracycline, they could have noticed people fared better by drinking beer. According to Charlie Bamforth, a professor in biochemistry and brewing science at the University of California, Davis said that they must have consumed it because it was rather tastier than the grain from which it was derived. They would have noticed people fared better by consuming this product than they were just by consuming the grain itself. Over in the East Africa area, European travelers in the Great Lakes region of Africa around Uganda and Rwanda during the 19th century reported cases of surgery in the kingdom of Burio Kintara. I know I mispronounced that. But one observer noticed a surgical skill which had reached a high standard. Cesarean sections were used and performed on a regular basis with the use of anesthetics, anesthesias, and cautery iron. The expected mother was normally anesthetized with a banana wine, and herbal mixtures were used to encourage healing. From the well-developed nature of procedures employed, European observers concluded that they had been employed for some time. Surgeons treated lung inflammations by punching holes in the chest until the air passed freely. Trampining was carried out and the bones of the depressed fractures were elevated. Horrible war wounds, even penetrating abdominal and chest wounds, were treated with success, even when this involved quite heroic surgery. Around the South Africa area, a South African, Max Steller, developed a vaccine against yellow fever in 1937. Alan McLeod-Cormick developed the theoretical underpinnings of CT scanning and co-invented the CAT scanner, the CT scanner. The first human-to-human heart transplant was performed by South African cardiac surgeon Christian Barnard in Groote Schuur Hospital in December 1967. During the 1960s, South African Aaron Klung developed a crystallographic electron microscopy techniques in which a sequence of two-dimensional images of crystals taken from different angles are combined to produce three-dimensional images of the target. When it comes to agriculture and cattle farming, North Africa and the Nile Valley area, archaeologists have long debated whether or not the independent domestication of cattle occurred in Africa as well as the Near East in the Indus Valley. Possible remains of domesticated cattle were identified in the western desert of Egypt at the sites of Nebta Playa and were dated to c. 9500 to 8000 BP, but those identifications have been questioned. Genetic evidence suggests that the cattle were most likely introduced from Southwest Asia and that there have been there sometime later during breeding with wild Araucans in North Africa. Genetic evidence also indicates that donkeys were domesticated from the African wild ass. Archaeologists have found donkey burials in the early dynastic context dating 5000 BP at Abydos in Middle Egypt, and the examination of the bones shows that they were used as beasts of burden. Cotton may have been domesticated 5000 BCE in the eastern Sudan near the Middle Nile Basin region where cotton cloths were being produced. So even on that note with the cotton, we've been producing cotton way before we started picking it for the slave masters in the Americas. That's very interesting. Ain't nothing new under the sun, like I told you before in part 2. But over here to the East Africa area, the Iron Age archaeologist sites in North Tanzania known for the ruins of complex irrigation systems. Stone channels were used like dike, dam, and level surrounding water areas. Some of these channels were several kilometers long, channeling feeding individual plots of land totaling approximately 5,000 acres. 7 stone terraces villages along the mountainside also comprised the settlement. You know, we've been doing cattle farming, we've been doing agriculture, So that was something that was actually second nature to us when we were doing it in the Americas for the slave masters for free. That's why we adapted to it so easily. And besides the fact that we were being killed, those conditions that we were in, be it be known that they were horrible because of how we were being fed and how we were stuck out in the sun all day from sun up to sundown. But we were already doing this. And we actually taught them this way before they took us into chains. Those people don't understand. Because we've had ox-drawn plows, which seem to have been used in Ethiopia for 2 millennia and possibly much longer. Linguistic evidence suggests that the Ethiopian plow might have been the oldest plow in Africa. Teff is believed to be originated in Ethiopia between 4000 and 1000 BCE. Genetic evidence points to E. plaza as being the most likely wild ancestor. Nug and Insid are two other plants domesticated in Ethiopia. Around the West Africa area, the earliest evidence of domestication of plants for agricultural purposes in Africa occurred in the Sahel region, 5000 BCE, when the sorghum and the African rice began to be cultivated. Around this time, in the same region, the small guinea fowl was domesticated. Other African domesticated plants were oil palm, raffia palm, black-eyed peas, groundnuts, and kola nuts. We've been doing this. This is not nothing new to our people and to our ancestors. That's why we also use these type of grains and different nuts and berries for medical purposes. It was only up until the white man decided to add other stuff to the supplements for our bodies and implementing chemicals and etc. to supposedly sustain our bodies. But we've been had the recipes of keeping us safe, keeping our bodies healthy ever since the beginning of time, pretty much. But African methods of cultivating rice introduced by enslaved Africans may have been used in North Carolina. This may be a factor in the prosperity of North Carolina colony. Portuguese observers between half of the 15th century and the 16th century witnessed the cultivation of rice in the upper Guinea coast and admired the local rice growing technology, as it involved intense agricultural practices such as diking and transplanting. Yams were domesticated in 8000 BCE in West Africa, and between 7000 and 5000 BCE, pearl millets, grounds, watermelons, and beans also spread westward across the southern Sahara. Between 6500 and 3500 BCE, knowledge of domesticated sorghum and castor beans and two species of gourd spread from Africa to Asia. Pearl millet, black-eyed peas, watermelon, and okra later spread to the rest of the world. And the lack of the more detailed historical and archaeological studies on the chronology of terracing, intense terrace farming is believed to have been practices by the early 15th century AD in West Africa. Terraces were used by many groups, notably the Mafi, Nagas, Guza, and the Dogon. I know I mispronounced half of them incorrectly, but you get my point. We've been doing this shit since the beginning of time. So get off the bullshit like y'all saved us from some shit when we was already living like in our own Eden from the beginning of time until y'all came and fucked up some shit and colonized our whole fucking continent. When it came to textiles, in North Africa, Egyptians wore linen from flax plant and looms as early as 4000 BCE. Nubians mainly wore cotton, beaded leather, and linen. Around the West Africa area, some of the oldest surviving African textiles were discovered at the archaeological sites of Kisi and northern Burkina Faso. They are made of wool and fine animal hair, and welt-faced plants were woven in pattern. Fragments of textile have also been survived from the 13th century in Benin City of Nigeria. Cotton is widely used in making bubu for men and kafta for women. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce this, but it's spelled BogolaNFini, which is basically mud cloth. Is a cotton textile dyed in fermented mud, tree sap, and teas handmade by the Bambara people of the Bigulu region in central Mali. And that's a shame because, this is our ethnic history, whether we came from that exact region or not. And we're not even taught the proper dialects to say this stuff. But it was done for a reason. It wasn't done by accident. It wasn't done by mistake. You can make a person a slave if they don't know where they came from. Exactly. By the 12th century, the so-called Moroccan leather, which actually came from the Hausa area of northern Nigeria, was supplied to the Mediterranean markets and found their way to the fairs and markets of Europe. Kente was produced by the Akan people and Iwi people in the countries of Togo, Ghana, Cote, and around Central Africa. Among Kubu people in present-day Democratic Republic of Congo, raffia clothes were weaved. They were used the fibers of the leaves of the raffia palm plant. So we've been making clothes, all this stuff, way before the so-called white man came out the caves. Way before. We domesticated them, but we were taught that they domesticated us. When it came to maritime technology, in 1987, the third oldest canoe in the world and the oldest in Africa, the Dufana canoe, was discovered in Nigeria. Around the North Africa Nile Valley, Carthage fleet included large numbers of quadrines and quadrimanes warships with 4 and 5 ranks of rows. Its ships dominated the Mediterranean. The Romans, however, were masters of copying and adapting technology of other peoples. According to Paulus, the Romans seized shipwrecks, Carthaginian warships, and used it as a blueprint for a massive naval buildup, adding their own refinement, the corvus, which allowed enemy vessels to be gripped and boarded for hand-to-hand fighting. This negated the initial superiority of the Carthaginian sea ships and warships. Early Egyptians knew how to assemble planks of wood into a ship's hull as early as 3000 BC. The oldest ships yet unearthed, a group of 14 discovered obelisk, were constructed from wooden planks which were sewn together. Woven straps were used to lash planks together, and reeds or grass stuffed between the planks helped to seal the seams. Because the ships are all buried together, a near mortuary complex belonging to Pharaoh Kashikui? I'm sorry. Originally, the boats were all were all thought to have belonged to him. When it comes to architecture, around the West Africa area, walls of Benin City are collected the world's largest man-made structure and were semi-destroyed by the British in 1897. Sungbo's Erdos is the second largest pre-colonial monument in Africa, larger than the Great Pyramids or Great Zimbabwe, built by the Yoruba people in honor of their titled personages and aristocratic window known as Orie. It is made of sprawling mud walls and the valleys that surrounded the town of Iji Udi in Ogun State, Nigeria. Tikrit is the oldest surviving archaeological settlement in the Sahel, and it's the oldest all-stone settlement in the south of the Sahara. It's thought to have been built by the Soninke people. The Great Mosque of Dine is the largest mud brick or adobe building in the world and is considered by many architects to be the greatest achievement of the Sudano-Saharan architectural style, albeit with the definite Islamic influence. Africa's first writing system and the beginning of the alphabet was Egyptian hieroglyphs. Two scripts have been direct offsprings of the Egyptian hieroglyphs, the Proto-Semitic script and the Meroitic alphabet. Out of the Proto-Semitic came the South Arabian alphabet and the phonetic alphabet, out of which the Aramaic alphabet, Greek alphabet, Brahmi script, Arabic alphabet were directly or indirectly derived. When the arrival of Islam came the Arabic alphabet and the Sahel. Arabian writing is widespread in the Sahel. Arabic script was also used to write native African languages. The script used in its captivity, often called Ajami. The languages have been written by Ajami, including Hausa, Mandali, Fulani, Wufai, Tamazight, Nubian, Yoruba, Songhai, and Karen. Most of tropical Africa did not have a cavalry. Horses would be wiped out by the tsetse fly. The zebra was never domesticated. The army of tropical Africa consisted of mainly infantry. Weapons included bows and arrows with low bow strength that compressed with poison-tipped arrows. Throwing knives were made for use in Central Africa. Spears could be dubbed as thrusting, cutting weapons, and swords were also in use. Heavy clubs, when thrown, could break bones. Battle axes and shields of various sizes were in widespread use. Later, guns, muskets such as the flintlock, wheel-lock, and matchlock. Contrary to popular belief and perception, guns were also widespread in Africa. They typically were in poor quality, a policy of European nations to provide poor quality merchandise. One reason the slave trade was also successful, the widespread use of guns in Africa. Massive earthworks were built around cities and settlements west of Africa, typically defended by soldiers with bow and poison-tipped arrows. The earthworks were some of the largest man-made structures in Africa and the world, such as the Wall of Benin. In Central Africa, the Algon region, one of the purposes for ditches which were more successful defense against war with the Europeans. Biologicals were extensively in use in many parts of Africa, most of the time form of poison arrows, but also powder spread on the war front from the form of poisoning horses and water supply of the opponents. In South Sudan, the people of the Kolat Hills kept their country free of Arabs' invasions by using tsetse flies as weapons of war. Several accounts can give us an idea of the efficiency of biologicals. At the Battle of Island Swallow on January 22, 1879, the Zulu army defeated the British invading troops. You can reference that with the movie Shaka Zulu. From the 1960s to the 1980s, South Africans pursued research of weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. 6 nuclear weapons were assembled with the anticipated changeover to a majority of elected governments in the 1900s. Commerce. Numerous metal objects and other items were used as currency in Africa. They are follows: shells, salt, gold, copper, ingots, iron, chain tips, spears, iron knives, cloths, various shapes, squared and rolled. Copper was as valuable as gold in Africa. Copper was not as widespread and more difficult to acquire except in Central Africa than gold. Other valuable metals included lead and tin. Salt was also as valuable as gold because of its scarcity, and it also was used as currency. Carthage imported copper, gold, ivory, and slaves from tropical areas. Carthage exported salt, cloth, metal goods before camels were used in the trans-Saharan trade. Pack animals, oxen, donkey, mules, and horses were utilized. Around the East Africa area, Ascom exported ivory, glass, crystal, brass, copper, mirror, and frankincense. The Askanites imported silver, gold, olive oil, wine. The Askanites produced coins around 270 CE under the rule of King Ebitus. Ascamite coins were issued in gold, silver, and bronze. The Swahili served as middlemen. They connected the African goods and Asian markets and Asian goods from African markets. Their most in-demand export was ivory. They exported ambergris, gold, leopard skin, slaves, and tortoise shells. They imported pottery, glassware from Asia. They also manufactured items such as cotton, glass, shells, beads. Imported and locally manufactured goods were used to trade and acquire among African goods. Trade links included Arabian Peninsula, Persia, India, and China. The Swahili also minted silver and copper coins. Current scientific research in Africa. Ahmed won the 1999 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for his work in female chemistry, methods that allow the description of change states in femtoseconds or very short seconds. The Democratic Republic of Congo has a rocketry program called Troposphere. Currently, 40% of African-born scientists live in OECD countries, predominantly NATO and European countries. This has been described as an African brain drain.